Hey, wait a minute. We're almost bums, not action movie heroes. Welcome to the Mind Your Movies podcast.
Where we are action movie heroes.
No, we're not. We're podcasters, not action movie heroes.
True. We're just podcasting bums.
Yeah. And this week we're talking about Tokyo Godfathers. Satoshi Kon's 2003 Christmas animated masterpiece, maybe? Great movie.
It's pretty awesome.
This is my first time seeing it, and this is definitely like a Christmas classic. I'm surprised this is not more well known as one of the best Christmas movies of all time.
Yeah, this is definitely it's my first time seeing it too, and it will not be my last. I'll totally be rewatching this on Christmas.
Yeah.
And it's a nice change of pace from I think some of the common just stupid comedy movies that we can watch. This is like a more meaningful and deep Christmas movie. Not that they all are like that. But
yeah, definitely.
You can find yourself watching Elf every year and you're not gonna,
Yeah. And before we get into Tokyo Godfathers too much, anyone listening, go check out our Letterboxd, Mind Your Movies. From there, you can find all our podcast links, our YouTube, Blue Sky, Instagram. We're all over the internet. We're also trying to post some reels and YouTube shorts. We got a few of them out now. So if anyone's curious, check out our Instagram, the Mind Your Movies podcast, and you can see our short reels there. And they're kind of fun. They're kind of cool.
Yeah, a little bit of movie trivia.
Yes, we're doing some movie trivia. That's the idea. But yeah, you can email us, mindyourmoviespodcast@gmail.com, and we'll read emails on the show if we ever get one. And and yeah, basically, spoiler warning, if you haven't seen Tokyo Godfathers, we are going to talk spoilers.
That's right. And if you haven't seen it, pause this, just spend 92 minutes, go watch this movie, come on back. It's a blast. You'll enjoy it.
Absolutely worth watching. So yeah, I mean, how did you watch this? Did you watch with subs?
Yes, I did. I watched it subtitled for free on Tubi. So I did have ads, but you know what? It was worth it.
We love Tubi.
We do. I mean, Tubi has a wide range of quality of movies.
Yeah.
How did you watch this one?
I watched it on Amazon Prime with subtitles.
Excellent.
Yeah, it was great. Very much enjoyed it. So yeah, I mean, we can just get into it.
Yeah, well, and we are not, I think, the only ones that enjoy this movie. Out there, the average ratings are very high for this movie. We've got 7.8 out of 10 on IMDb, 4.2 out of 5 on Letterboxd, 92% on Rotten Tomatoes, 91% audience score, bringing it to one of our highest averages on the podcast, 8.625. So yeah, that's definitely up there with some of our higher rated movies. Luckily, we've been covering a lot of bangers, and this just keeps the trend up. So we like that.
Yeah, we've been covering a lot of good movies on the show. So yeah, it's Tokyo Godfathers, came out in 2003, co-written and directed by Satoshi Kon. The other co-writer is Keiko Nobumoto, who is a woman. I don't know if... I feel like Satoshi, a lot of anime is very male centric, a lot of male writers, directors, etc. But this movie is written by a woman, and I feel like you can kind of feel that a little bit, where it's a little bit more sentimental, not to be stereotyping, but you know.
Yeah, well, and there's also, I think, a big focus on our one of our characters is transgender female. A transgender female in the movie who has a big emphasis in the movie. She's kind of like a motherly character here. And I think you can kind of feel that it feels like through a feminine perspective in a way.
Yeah, I could see that. And there's definitely a lot involving motherhood in the themes of the movie.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So a little interesting fact about the movie is that the title is actually inspired by the John Ford movie, Three Godfathers, which is a Western about three guys who find a baby. Three cowboys find a baby. I haven't seen the movie, but that's a fun fact.
Interesting. So the title's inspired. Do you know if... I assume the whole plot might have been inspired. Is that right? People finding a baby?
I really don't. I think it's just the finding the baby part. I don't know that it has to do with Christmas or Japanese homeless people or any of that. I think it might just be the premise
Gotcha.
The title are inspired by. But again, I haven't seen the movie. Maybe it is, but I think it's just cowboys find a baby. But yeah, I mean, we follow Miyuki, who's a 16-year-old girl, Hannah, who's a transgender woman. I guess at the time in the movie, people refer to her as a man or like a gay man. But I think nowadays we would like acknowledge that this character is a transgender woman.
Yeah.
But the character is voiced by a man, at least in the Japanese version, the like main version. And then Jin, who is like an alcoholic older man. And it's really the three of them are kind of a weird ramshackle family. They're all homeless, living on the streets in Tokyo, and they come across a baby and they have to figure out what to do. And that's the it's kind of high concept in a way.
Yeah, and it's interesting because they really do like come off as a family, right? Like I think one of the big themes that comes up a lot in this movie, obviously, is family, right? I mean, and with Hannah kind of being the mother figure here, and Miyuki being the kind of daughter, and Jin being the dad, like they really like build this family dynamic together. And even in like the way that Hannah and Jin will argue at times, and Miyuki will like kind of just be like quiet and like there for the argument in a way, definitely feels like a family dynamic. Yeah,
for sure. And it's like a weird family dynamic for sure. But so like at the beginning, Jin and Hannah go to like a nativity play and they go to church because afterwards they're feeding the homeless I don't know if it's on Christmas Day or Christmas Eve, or it's around Christmas time. I don't know if they ever specify, but so they bring food back to Miyuki, who's like they're like living on a rooftop somewhere, it seems like, or that's where she is at the time.
Yeah, she has a counter of how many times she spit on someone from the rooftop.
Oh, yeah. Yep. Yeah, the beginning of the movie doesn't make the characters the most likable, which I think totally works because honestly, it makes it realistic, right? They're not these like fake Hollywood perfect people who, they just happen to be homeless. No, they're all very flawed, and it makes it more realistic and more emotionally engaging.
Yeah, definitely.
Like in the beginning, just for example, like Jin calls Hannah a slur, like a homophobic slur. And I mean, maybe the worst part of the entire movie is so they bring her the food and then they start rummaging through trash. And this is literally right before they find the baby. Jin, what exactly happens? But they're fighting and Jin calls Miyuki a kid. And she says, "I'm not a kid." And then he grabs her boob and says, "With little tits like these?" And she's like, and she gets all angry. That was by far like the worst part of the movie for me. If they just got rid of that one, it's just a little throwaway joke. Like it doesn't ruin the whole movie for me, but that's like,
it was a bad joke. Yeah.
It's a terrible joke. It's horrible. Yeah. Like if you, I mean, I guess watching it, I'm kind of just able to be like, okay, that's just a stupid joke. And I'm able to just kind of throw it away and just act like it didn't happen. But like, yeah, that is definitely crossing the line.
Yeah. I think there are parts of this movie, and that might even be beyond this, but there's definitely parts of this movie, like you mentioned the slur and stuff, that like didn't quite age well. Like this is 2003. And so there's some stuff that didn't age well. And I think that's not even maybe that it didn't age well. That probably just, I can't imagine that was even a very good joke in 2003, but.
Oh, interesting. Cause I think like that joke is, maybe it was bad then, but I think it is a thing of aging really, really badly. But the slurs and stuff, I kind of think work in the context of the movie because it's said by characters who, like, it wouldn't make any sense if Jin was completely accepting of a transgender woman. Like, this is like a 50-year-old Japanese guy in 2003. Like, you know what I mean? And he's an alcoholic. Like, he's not, it just wouldn't make any sense. So even though obviously it's like not politically correct for nowadays, I think it fits the character, Yeah,
that's true. Yeah.
But yeah. And it's interesting because, like, I don't know. Hannah also will like make joking, like call herself a homo and stuff like that. And it just seems like the entire attitude is from a different time than if this was made like in America now, you know?
Right. I guess that's the thing. It definitely feels like from a different time, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, anyway, maybe we can just move on from that. And then they, like, right after that, they find the baby in the trash.
Yes.
And, yeah. And then actually there's like opening credits right after. It's kind of a cool, it's like maybe 5 to 10 minutes of the opening before the opening credits. And then the opening credits, you can see them all like on storefronts and billboards and stuff. It's pretty cool the way they do it.
Yeah. The opening credits were definitely very fun. And I think like also just to kind of build on to what you were saying before about like the awkward family dynamic or just like bad family dynamic that they have. And like just kind of how poorly they treat each other. There's a point like right after they find the baby where Jin just starts hitting. Oh, you know what? I think it's because Miyuki might have mentioned something about like a bad parents or something, or a bad, you know, people abandoning their family. And then Jin just starts hitting Miyuki a bunch.
She like hits her on like the top of the head, very cartoony, I think.
Yeah,
yeah.
And like obviously it's cartoony and it's kind of goofy and funny, but it does kind of build into that whole like bad family dynamic that they have.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of times where they just they treat each other very poorly. Like there's a point later on when Jin is talking about like, well, he's telling the story to Hannah about how he was a racer and a bike racer and was trying to get money for his kid who was sick, and then she passed away and everything. And Hannah after that was just like, geez, I didn't want to hear that sad story. Like it's like they're just like mean to each other.
Yeah. But I will say, out of these characters, I think part of the reason that the movie ages well in regards to like having a transgender character, even though it's voiced by a man and, you know, it is from a different time, I think she is a character who, like, the reason Miyuki and Jin are homeless is kind of self-sabotage to some degree, or it's part of their own character flaws. But really her reason is partially self-sabotage, I guess, but it's really just because she's an outcast from society. And I think she's probably the most sympathetic character, or like least flawed character, maybe you could say.
Yeah. Well, and even like even with the whole idea of it being from a different time and like maybe not aging the best in terms of how they represent a transgender person, it is also, I mean, it's 2003 and one of the leads is a transgender woman, right? Like that's remarkable for the time. Like,
yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And of course, like, it's going to be dated, but it also like wasn't really a thing that often before. Right. So
yeah, definitely not. And like to have the scenes at the club later on where it's a very welcoming environment and like everyone's very friendly, like it's not demonizing them at all. I think it's a very a very positive portrait of transgender people. It doesn't come across to me as being like bigoted or anything like that.
Yeah. And I think like it's just the way that people interact, but that's also like, that is also just part of the reality of 2003, right? Like how people react to how people reacted to transgender people then is much different than it is now, right?
Yeah. And I think it's not the movie being like transphobic. Right. I think it's certain characters in the movie being transphobic or saying transphobic things.
Yeah. And again, like I think this movie kind of, honestly, I think it deserves a lot of praise for having one of the 3 Tokyo Godfathers being a transgender woman in 2003. Like that is just so, it feels very, very early. And I didn't bother like looking back too much on that time period and like other cinema at the time. But I know I can't imagine there was a whole lot of representation at the time. I mean, it's still, there's still few and far between today, I think. So.
Yeah, especially, I mean, not this is a super mainstream movie, but definitely in like mainstream Hollywood movies, there was pretty much no representation besides like bad transphobic jokes in like comedies and stuff like that. That was pretty much like it, or I guess like The Crying Game, where it's like treated like a shocking, I don't know, like it's kind of a transphobic reveal. You could kind of look at it that way.
Yeah.
So it definitely, this is a way more positive portrayal than most things at that time.
Yeah. And yeah, I think it's really great. And I don't even think that it really plays it up for jokes. Like, I think that I think the way that people interact at times is meant to be humorous or whatever, or comedic, but it doesn't feel like she's not just there as a caricature and as a joke, right? Like she has a meaningful backstory and she's a real person in this story. And I think that's a huge step in the right direction for representation at this time. So
yeah, for sure. And there is like toward the end, when there's that whole chase, when she's running, she does like her hands are up and she's running like kind of like a gay run, and if that was out of context, I could see someone looking at that and being like, oh, so the queer character has to run like that, like that's kind of homophobic. But I feel like because she's such a complicated and like character that with depth, then it doesn't come across as homophobic to me. It just comes across as just a joke,
Right. Yeah, exactly. Totally.
But yeah.
Anyways, we're jumping so far into it already, into like the meaning of everything already. We haven't even started the story.
That's all right. I mean, they find the baby. They kind of go to various places. They end up at a cemetery, and then they find a mob boss stuck under a car. And they help him out. The mob boss sort of gives them, I think it's like 30,000 yen, which I'm not sure how much that would translate to in like American dollars at the time. But seems like a good chunk of change, especially for homeless people, right?
Yeah.
So the mob boss ends up taking them to the wedding because they ask him about, I don't know, it's kind of convoluted. They have a picture of Sachiko, who they think is the mother of the baby, and that's all they have to work off of. And so I think they have a business card. Maybe they found a business card or something.
Yeah. Well, I think they found a bag in a locker, and then because there was a key with the baby. And so they put that key, they found the locker, I think that key goes to, and it had a bag in it. And in that bag, there was some family photos, and there was maybe a business card and a bunch of other stuff. But I think they were mostly trying to hunt down the family with the family photos. At times, even like matching the cityscape in the background with the cityscape they were finding.
Yeah, that goes on later on when they find their house.
Right. But yeah, so they might have had a business card at this point and gotten more information with that.
Yeah. And this is like one of the first instances of like huge coincidences in the movie.
Yeah.
Which I think sometimes in movies that can be frustrating if it's just like a ridiculous coincidence. But there's something about it being a Christmas movie, and there is this theme of Christmas magic, Christmas spirit, especially with the ending, where all these coincidences just don't bother me. And maybe I'm giving the movie a pass, but I feel like it fits with the themes and the vibe of the movie.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, it's funny because like the first couple coincidences kind of seem like maybe they're for comedy. And then there's a few more later on that start making you think maybe this is like a stronger motif in the movie than just for jokes every once in a while. And yeah, I'm not really sure how to wrap my brain around like what it means as a motif or anything like that. But there's definitely that element, like you were saying, of like the Christmas miracle and like you said, at the end of the movie, kind of saving the day even. But yeah, I didn't find myself getting annoyed with it either. I think the first couple times it felt like a funny coincidence. And then it started feeling more meaningful later on though.
Yeah, definitely. I could see, I don't know if Satoshi Kon was religious or Christian or anything, but I could definitely see there being maybe interpretations about, religious interpretations of the movie, especially like with the ending. But yeah, it's kind of cool. They go to the wedding, and the mob boss's daughter is marrying the owner of a club where Sachiko used to work at. And there's a hit, it looks like a waitress. Turns out it's a Latin American hitman who tries to kill the mob boss. And then the son-in-law, I guess, jumps in front of the bullet and takes the bullet for him. And then the hitman sort of takes Miyuki hostage to get out and ends up taking her back to his apartment and separating her from Jin and Hannah.
Yeah. And in this mix, there's a point when Jin, you don't know why yet, but Jin is about to attack either the hitman's son, not the hitman's son, the mob boss's son, or the mob boss with a bottle. And right before he's able to is when the attack happens. So he gets saved there by a coincidence, because surely if he hit the guy, things would have gone very badly for him. But so another one of those coincidences that comes up quite a lot. Also, I like, this movie is very meaningful, but it also is really funny. Like, I think there was this really, really funny moment when they're going to the cemetery when they pointed out, and I forget exactly what they said, but there was some like really dark humor there about the fact that they're going to a cemetery to eat and drink because people leave food and stuff there. And there was some funny line there. And I think as I talk about this movie, I might not mention the humor a whole lot, but it is a really funny movie. I think there's a lot of times where I was pretty close to just cracking up. So
it's very funny. And but the humor is very much like rooted in the characters and stuff. It's not like goofy. I mean, I guess there are moments where it's like a little cartoony and goofy, but I feel like it fits very well with the characters and the story too.
Yeah.
I mean, pretty much that he takes her back, and Miyuki sort of ends up like bonding with the hitman's wife, and the hitman's wife has a kid. Also, Miyuki has the kid who they named Kyoko. Miyuki has Kyoko with her, and then the hitman's wife also has a baby, and her and the hitman only speak Spanish, and it's not subtitled, which I thought was a very effective way of just putting us in Miyuki's like perspective of not understanding what they're saying, even though I understood a little bit because I took a couple years of Spanish in high school. But
same. But I also thought that was an interesting way to make you feel confused in that setting, right? Because at first, I'm sure she's like worried, right, when the hitman's talking to her in Spanish in the back of the car, and she doesn't know what he's saying. But then as she gets to the house, even without understanding them, she's feeling more welcomed by the hitman's girlfriend or wife or whatever with the kid. And so it's like through the interactions alone that she feels more comfortable, not through the language.
Yeah, definitely. And they're also sort of outcasts in society. Like, I can't imagine there can't be many Latin American people in Tokyo. Like, they are definitely outcasts in a similar way to our main characters. And that seems to be like a theme of the movie, is sort of outcasts and family and found family and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But at this point, they sort of split up all the characters. I think Jin and Hannah get into a fight, and they end up going their separate ways. And so Jin finds the old man passed out drunk, and he brings him back to his little shack.
Yeah, shelter.
Yeah, shelter. And it's like in the park. It might be the same park. I'm not sure. There's probably a million parks, so it's probably a different park.
But and the old man asks for like he asked for one last request or something, and Jin knows exactly. Jin's like, you want to drink? Like, and at one point he asked for something else too. He gives him a bag, but I don't remember what this was.
I don't know.
Maybe he was paying him or something for the drink.
Oh, maybe. I'm not sure. But definitely Jin, I think, sees himself in the old man, and it maybe is a wake-up call of what his future is going to be. And there's that line, the old man saying, like, I always wanted to die drunk in a mansion, and I'm halfway there. But so he's like, at least I'm drunk, and that definitely seems like a cautionary tale for Jin. Yeah.
And there's this point where Jin thinks that the guy dies, and so he reaches over to close his eyes, and the guy's still awake, or still alive, and then he asks for another drink, and then I think after that other drink, he says, "Now it's time I can say goodbye," or something like that, and then closes his eyes, and So it was kind of an oddly, like, I laughed a little bit at first when I realized he was still alive, because I thought the shock factor there was kind of funny. Yeah. And then like moments later, he's dead. And I was like, oh,
yeah,
sad.
Yeah. This movie does have a lot of like, the tone is kind of always going back and forth, but it always seemed to work for me.
Yeah.
And I think also with the plot, it seems like it's always moving forward. Something's always happening. Like at this point, they're intercutting between different characters in different locations. And maybe that's a thing with all of Satoshi Kon's movies, where there is usually like a pretty something complicated going on, and he keeps the pace very quick, and he's just kind of like keeps going, and he's like, all right, the audience is just gonna have to keep up, right? And this movie is probably the least difficult to follow of all of his movies, just because it's like pretty realistic and there's not very dreamlike or anything like that, but it is very fast paced, and I feel like the story's always moving forward.
Yeah. It's definitely fast. I think the pacing in this is one of the best things. It's only 92 minutes, and I wouldn't say this movie ever feels like it lingers or like overstays its welcome, even in just a normal scene. Like, I don't think there's a scene that goes on for too long.
Yeah. But nothing feels rushed either. Like, there are plenty of moments of like calm or like little reflective moments, and I don't know, it's just a very like perfect balance between not feeling rushed but also not feeling dragged out at all.
Yeah. And speaking of the tone kind of shifting back and forth, though, right after the old man dies, Jin is like leaving and he's attacked by kids. And it like does this comedic thing where one of the kids coming up to attack him slips and like falls backwards, kind of cartoony a little bit. And then they get up and they're actually beating the crap out of him. And it was like really sad. And again, I think that shifting of the tone, it didn't really like bother me, but I think describing like those scenes, it's hard not to acknowledge that the tone shifts so much. But I think it's still effective somehow.
Yeah, I wonder if this being animated maybe helps, where some of the more like brutal and sad parts of the story are less like, they feel less visceral because it's animated, perhaps. So it's able to just sort of keep on going, and you're not like, I don't know, maybe that is just a benefit. Maybe that's just a subconscious thing in our minds, where with animated movies, I'm not sure.
I could totally believe that, because like, they really beat him up. But even at the end of that beating up scene, one of them just gets a call from some girls, and it's like, I think he tells his friends, oh, the girls are drinking nearby or something. So they all just leave. And it's kind of like a funny reason for them to leave. But also, yeah, we just watched one of our main characters get like the crap beaten out of him. So there's these awkward, like, how are you supposed to feel moments? But that's an interesting question. If it was live action, would like that scene specifically, would that feel like a more awkward shifting tone, right? With the jokes and whatnot. I don't know.
It's maybe. I mean, they don't shy away from that stuff. Like, later on, there's a close up of his face, and it's very detailed, like the blood and bruises all over his face and all that. But yeah, also I feel like that scene, the nonchalance of the kids, like, this is just a cruel thing that kids do, but they don't think of it that way. It's just like, they're just shitty kids not thinking about that, and I feel like that is a very realistic depiction of those kind of things. It's sad. It's like that scene has a lot of depth in like emotion and stuff too, just because it's like, it's so sad and sad to just think that kids can be like that, right? Yeah, but it feels realistic to me. Like, it feels like that's how that type of thing would happen. It wouldn't be like, I don't know, I feel like some other movie would make it a more, I don't know. I just feel like the way that they're so nonchalant and not caring about it is almost even more cruel. Just that because they really see him as less than human. Like, and that's, the reality of how a lot of people do look at homeless people and stuff like that. So, yeah. And this stuff happens. Like, you do hear about this on the news sometimes, where kids actually do just like beat up people on the street, when like homeless people on the street. And
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll almost be like there would be like those like challenges of like knockout challenge or something, just like knock out some random person on the street and they like kill an old person because they just punched an old guy in the head like for no reason, just being a stupid teenager. And that really feels like what is happening in the scene.
Yeah. Yeah, those like real life consequences of what you're actually doing to someone, like a real person.
Yeah.
Aren't in your head right now, right? They're somehow. But
yeah, and this movie does very good of humanizing the main characters as homeless people. And I mean, that is whatever like Roger Ebert says about movies. It's like the empathy machine where you can walk, spend like an hour and a half, 2 hours in someone else's shoes and, just open people's eyes to, these are actual human beings with they all have their own stories and their flaws, but they are people. And you know what I mean? Yeah. That is a big theme in the movie. And one of the many great things about the movie.
Yeah, maybe if these kids had seen Tokyo Godfathers before, they would have had more empathy for these people and not felt so careless about this attack,
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I think so. I think that's possible, right? I don't know.
No, for real. Yeah, I think this movie definitely helps shed light on like the hardships and reality of what real people go through, right? I mean, yeah. So, I mean, now to get back to the plot, the characters are all split up, and eventually Hannah finds the same cab that the hitman took, and the cab driver drives her to the hitman's house, and she ends up finding Miyuki, and then they hear about a dead homeless man, I think, on the news. So they run over to the park, and Hannah's like crying, and there's a body on a gurney, and she opens it up and she's crying, and she sees it's the old man and it's not Jin, and she's like, oh, she like makes a funny face, and that's like another moment of that dark humor that's in the movie. But yeah, and meanwhile Jin is sort of like almost dying in an alley, and an angel appears to him, well, what he thinks is an angel, and offers him either magic or an ambulance, and he says an ambulance. And she's like, oh my god, you're so ungrateful, or something like that. So she takes him to the club, and they help him there, and turns out she's just like a dancer or whatever at the club. And eventually, I think it's just coincidence that Hannah and Miyuki end up at the club. Is there? I think it's the club that Hannah like used to work there, and I think that she goes there on purpose. I think they like don't know what else to do at this point. Right. I think she kind of has that in her mind as a place to go to ask for help. Yeah. And they still have the baby at this point, so it makes sense that that would maybe drive her to go back there. But yeah, this is when we see this gay club, I guess it is. It's not totally clear. I guess it's like maybe a cabaret club or something like that. And yeah, there's sort of another friend who I assume is a transgender woman as well. It seems like a lot of these characters are trans women. Yeah. Or drag queens or cross-dressers or something along those lines. Yeah. Yeah. And we like, this is, I think, one of the first times that I started to see another theme in the movie, which is like forgiveness. I think this comes up quite a lot in this movie, where there's a point when Hannah's talking to someone else at the tower and is saying like, something about not feeling like she could ever come back or something. And I forget what she had done, but it was like something that seemed pretty small, at least in the perspective of the other people there. She like, I think someone, I forget exactly what happened, but she ended up punching or kicking a patron in the face because he like didn't like her performance or something along those lines. And then after that, she was like, oh, I could never come back after I did that. And then the other lady who seems to like run the club is like, oh, we just gave him a little bit of money. It wasn't a big deal. But Hannah thought it was such a big deal. She never went back, and she became homeless, and it kind of ruined her life, but it actually wasn't that big of a deal. Yeah. And I think this unwillingness to forgive themselves is actually present in all three of our trio that we see at different points, but this is our first time seeing that. And right away, I kind of thought to myself, I was like, all three of our characters are going to have a moment like this where they realize that they they already were forgiven by the people that they feel like they wronged. They just haven't forgiven themselves. And I don't think that was like a problem that I could like kind of see that coming. I think it was, it kept me excited to see what else we'd experience with these characters. But
yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's a great point. That's definitely something that applies to all the characters. And I think I really like this scene also. Oh, here's Teddy. Oh, we have a special guest. We have
Teddy's
a special.
back.
Yep, there he is. He's not quite. Dude, come here. He's running around like a maniac. Let's see. I got him. Mid-show interruption.
Go, Teddy.
Look at that tail going. Hi, buddy. Oh hello.
The face attack.
Buddy. Yes. Oh, hey, buddy. He's a good boy. This was his first snow today. It snowed where we are, and he loved the snow. He ran around like a crazy dog. Okay.
Adorable.
Anyway, there's our Teddy cameo. But do you want to take him? So this scene was definitely one of the best scenes in the movie. I think it was very interesting seeing Hannah's backstory, and we learn about her like ex boyfriend or partner, Ken, who died, and that seemed to be a real catalyst for her like becoming homeless. And we hear about him dying, and I forget the name I wish I had the name of the character. I wonder if I wrote it down. But the other lady who runs the club, whatever. But she is like, "Oh, AIDS!" Like she kind of whispers it, and then Hannah is like, "No, it wasn't AIDS. It was something else. I forget exactly. Oh, cancer. But that is, even just mentioning that is like all these things that kind of are not talked about. Even in the club, it's like whispered, you know what I mean? And I thought it was just interesting seeing that type of backstory. And it didn't need, like, this one scene was enough to learn a lot about Hannah's life and how she became homeless and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And again, it's another one of these, like we already talked about, of really humanizing this character. Like, again, this was like true transgender representation in 2003, right? It wasn't a gimmick or laughs or anything like that. This was like a real person with a real story, and you get to see that here. And I think it is really impactful here. Yeah,
100%. So yeah, I mean, after this, there's also something we haven't mentioned yet. Is there these haikus that happen throughout the movie every once in a while? I think there's like 3 or 4 of them. One of them happens after this scene. I didn't write down what they all are, but I think that is kind of a nice little aspect of. It seems like they're all from Hannah's perspective. Like maybe she writes them or it's in her head or something. But I think that is a cool little part of the movie. And maybe, I think there might be 3 of them, and maybe they sort of separate different parts of the movie. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I definitely remember this one. And then I remember one more distinctly, but
there's one toward the beginning and there's one toward the end for sure.
Yeah. And it would make sense, I think, if there are 3, but yeah, I'm not entirely sure what they like separate. And actually, even when they came up, I was thinking to myself that I wasn't really sure like what their purpose was. You know, I didn't think they were uninteresting necessarily, but did you have any like thoughts on like what they represented or why they were used here?
Honestly, I'd have to go back and look at them again. I should have taken better notes about them.
No, I mean,
that's just a lot. Yeah, I think there's a lot going on in this movie. Like the plot is just always moving forward, and the characters are in different places and stuff. And so to like try to, because basically it slows down, it shows the haiku, but by the time you're interpreting it, it's already on to the next scene. So it's a little hard to get, I don't know, to get that out of it on a first viewing. I think maybe on second viewings, when you go back and look at it, it'll relate.
Yeah, I agree. I think I found myself like thinking like, oh, I should write this down, like the whole thing down and look back on it. But yeah, I mean, there was like writing down a whole haiku while you're trying to take notes for the movie and still being engaged in the movie. You know, like at that point you're just pausing it to do a thing. And so I don't know if I really got as much out of them as there probably is there to get out of them. But it was an interesting use of like a different media in this movie, which was cool.
Yeah. Yep. Definitely. So yeah, the next thing that happens really is they kind of just happen upon the place where Sachiko used to live. They have that photo of her with her husband, and they match it to the background of just this half demolished house that they are just staying in for the night. And then the next morning they get sort of gossip from the neighborhood ladies. It's pretty funny scene. Yeah. And they're giving them all the gossip about Sachiko and her husband and his gambling and all this type of stuff. And that's how we learn the backstory of Sachiko and her husband. And
just real quick, there's one point before this that I don't remember exactly when, but it's we learn a little bit more about the Miyuki, the girl. We learn a little bit about her backstory in a dream sequence where she is having this dream and she has like stabbed her father in the dream. And then she looks back and her mom's in the doorway, and then she looks back at her dad and something happens. But then when she looks back at her mother the second time, it's actually Hannah holding the baby. And then she looks back at the dad and it's Jin. And so there's this sequence where we're both learning a little bit about her backstory. But we also get this just like really cool dream sequence, which feels much more like Satoshi Kon than maybe a lot of the other movie where there's none of that dream stuff really happening. And also we get this representation where, at least in her subconscious, like in her dream, if you want to interpret that, right, then you can see that like Hannah and Jin are kind of taking her in as a family, right? And this comes back to that other theme that you talked about of like a found family, right?
Yep. I don't remember exactly when that was, but I do remember that scene. That is a very cool scene. And I like that we learn about the characters' backstories in very organic ways. And it tells us just enough where it doesn't linger or draw anything out. It just kind of gives us the information in an interesting way and then moves on.
Yeah, I agree. I think it feels very organic, feels very natural. And it makes the movie feel like a lot more like a real, like a real movie than, for example, some like schlocky Christmas movie, right?
Yeah.
I'm thinking of, around this time is when people probably start putting on a lot of random Christmas movies on in the background, which is great. And this is not one of those movies.
Yeah. This is a movie you really want to actually watch.
Yeah, sink in on.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, just as far as the plot goes, if we want to move on, basically, there's another coincidence. They're staying or they're just kind of loitering in like a restaurant, and this like drunk guy gets them kicked out, and then like 5 seconds later, a car crashes through the storefront and would have killed them. And then Hannah, they end up taking Hannah to the hospital.
Yeah.
I think. Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't remember exactly what happened to Hannah, but I think it was an ambulance that drives into the building. Yeah. Which I think made it more funny because then the ambulance, the like EMT, like stumbles out of the ambulance and says like, call an ambulance. But which was kind of funny. Again, like that dark humor was right there. And this was actually the coincidence that I mentioned earlier that made me like realize that the coincidences weren't just like funny, goofy moments, but that they were actually like an important motif that the writers wanted to show intentionally.
Yep. And another coincidence right after this is when they're at the hospital, Jin realizes his daughter is a nurse there, and that this is like exactly like an hour into the movie. And I'm like, oh my God, so much has happened in just an hour. Like this movie really does just keep rolling, because for this to only be an hour in and we've had all this stuff happen is just a lot.
Yeah, I 100% agree. This movie has so much in its first hour, but also just its whole 92 minutes. There's you learn so much about these characters and you go on such a journey with them.
Yeah,
it's a blast.
Yeah, it's like a full epic, and there's still so much more. There's like so many more scenes. I feel like we've been talking for almost an hour already, and there's so many scenes still. But if we do, maybe I can just run through the plot real quick. And I don't know.
Yeah, and then we can revisit maybe some themes that we want to talk about.
Exactly. But so Kyoko is Jin's daughter's name, which is also the name of the baby. I think it means like a surprise gift or something like that. Maybe, I'm not sure. But they end up having a conversation. Hannah ends up like freaking out at him, like, "Oh my God, you lied about your backstory. You're just a drunk who had gambling debt and abandoned his family." And then her and Miyuki leave while Jin stays with Kyoko. And then Hannah tells this interesting story about her being like her being the red devil and Jin is the blue devil, and the red devil acts like an asshole so that people will like the blue devil, sort of a thing. And she says how she had to do that in order to test and see like if Kyoko forgives him, then she'll be his daughter and it'll fix their relationship, type of a thing, which is another interesting part of the movie where there's just this whole other different animation style, like sort of a dream sequence of her explaining this allegory.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that too. That devil lore thing with the blue and the red devils. I thought that was a blast. It was a very fun sequence.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, basically, I have written here, Jin realizes baby was stolen. Oh yeah, because on the news, someone is saying that the baby is missing. So he kind of at some point he realizes that Sachiko is not the mother then. So Hannah and Miyuki, they're just walking down the street with the baby, and they're like, "Oh my God, I feel so bad. The mom is probably going to kill herself. Oh my God." And then in the background, a lady's about to jump off a bridge. So they run over, they stop her, they like grab her right as she's jumping off, and they realize it's Sachiko. Another huge coincidence. And this is intercutting with Jin. He like steals a bike and he's just biking as fast as he can to try to find them, I think. And basically Hannah slaps Sachiko because she's like, "How could you give up the baby?" Well, it's an emotional scene. They end up giving her the baby, and then Jin finds them later on, like right after that, and he tells them that she's not the real mom. So then they go on a chase after her, basically.
Yeah,
and this is where there's that funny line of Hannah being like, "Which way do we go?" And Jin says, "Left." And she says, "Okay, let's go right." And he's like, "Why?" And she says, "Because you're a terrible gambler." So
great line.
Yeah. And I don't want to rush through all these movies. If you do want to say anything.
No, I think this is good. Let's finish off there's just another minute or two left of the plot pretty much. And then the whole chase sequence happens. Yeah.
It's like Sachiko's at the park being all weird and creepy and creepy. So she ends up stealing a truck. Jin takes a bike, and then Hannah and Miyuki come across the same cabbie from earlier and he ends up following the truck with them.
Coincidence.
Another coincidence. Yep. And the truck Sachiko ends up crashing into a mall, and Jin saves the baby, but Sachiko steals the baby and runs up to the roof. And then Miyuki runs up to the roof and tells her, if you're going to, basically Sachiko's going to jump with the baby. And then Miyuki tells her to save the baby, all this stuff. She ends up trying, there's a whole thing with Jin and Sachiko's husband. He finds the husband and he tells the husband, like, "Stop with all this gambling. You're going to end up like me," type of a thing. And the husband ends up at the bottom of the mall, like, "Don't jump." But then she's going to jump anyway. So Miyuki grabs her and is hanging off, and then Jin grabs her. And eventually she drops the baby, and Hannah jumps over and catches it. But then she falls and she's about to die, but she grabs onto a sort of a ribbon.
Yeah.
And a wind comes. It's a very cool shot that follows the wind as it comes, and it catches the ribbon. And it's a really beautiful shot of right at sunrise. The ribbon catches and she lands very gracefully, and she saves the baby. And that's really the sort of the culmination, the climax of the movie, where everything comes together.
Yeah. And that final gust of wind, the very cinematic gust of wind there, is also that coincidence that you and I both alluded to earlier, that literally just saves the baby and also Hannah at the very end of the movie. It is,
Yeah.
I mean, at this point, the coincidences feel less like coincidences and more like a miracle at the end. There's something to be said about a miracle and a baby on Christmas, right?
Yep, that makes sense. And yeah, it definitely seems like almost maybe like the Holy Spirit or something like that, or like the divine intervention. That definitely comes across that way.
Yeah. And again, like I don't know if that's the whole point of the coincidences here, but the coincidence motif is so strong in this movie. You could, like, looking back, you could really take a coincidence counter on another rewatch and like just see how many you can add up. Because there's a lot. It's crazy.
Yeah. Right, definitely. And also there's a part right before she jumps with the baby where the baby speaks to Sachiko and says, like, I want to live.
Yeah.
Which is a little surreal moment at the end. I don't know if you had any thoughts about that, but
yeah. Well, I mean, it's interesting. Was that real? Was the baby actually saying that? Was that kind of like a dreamier sequence? Yeah, the baby's obviously not actually saying that, but
I was like, Ryan, I don't know about that one. That's a little crazy.
Listen, baby is
Jesus, baby.
This is no, but yeah, I don't know. That's an interesting. I almost missed that too. I remember that now, but I almost missed that going through it the first. I mean, I feel like there's so much that you can miss in this movie on the first watch. So
yeah, they also explain that Sachiko like had a miscarriage. They explain her backstory too, like when she's sort of pleading her case with Miyuki.
Yeah,
but yeah, there's that magical moment, and then they all end up in the hospital. They're all in the men's ward, which Hannah comments on, and it ends on New Year's. I think that whole thing was on New Year's Day or New Year's Eve, maybe. And then it turns out that Miyuki's dad is at the hospital because he's a police officer. And so he's with the parents of the baby and they want to thank them. They walk in and Miyuki sees her dad and they sort of, they don't say anything, but they just sort of recognize each other. And then there's a final shot of the baby and that's the end. And then over the final credits, the buildings and the skyline start dancing.
Hilarious.
Just for fun, I guess.
Also, there is the final, I think, one of the last things that's said in the movie is that the mom wants to make these three travelers into the godparents, right? The Godfathers.
Yeah.
There's the title, right? You gotta mention the title.
Yep. And I mean, did you have any thoughts about that final thing or about the credits?
I mean, I thought the credits were hilarious with the dancing buildings and a very funny it's obviously the goofiest thing that happens in the movie, and it's just hilarious to me that the whole movie has like a lot of dark humor and humor around the characters, but then at the very during the credits they just have the fun goofy dancing buildings.
I guess in a way it's like everything works out. It's just a happy ending. I guess, I mean, pretty great movie, right? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, so there's one more theme that didn't come up, that I wrote down that didn't come up yet. We talked about the theme of like found family, and there's so much there in this movie that we didn't touch on, but I think it's also the most obvious theme in the movie, because we follow a found family as they go and reunite with their families or found families. But there was also a theme that I picked up on, at least a little bit, of like waste in the sense, and like excess in the sense that like they go to the cemetery and people leave out all this food and full bottles of stuff, right? And every time, like, there's so many times where they're just at an alley or something and there's mounds of garbage and they find so much like full authentic food and stuff in there. And I don't know if this is like truly a lens that Sajigawan was like thinking about in 2003 or not, but definitely something like looking back on this movie that you can kind of see this perspective on like excess and trash and waste that at least the Godfathers here, the three main characters, are picking up on throughout the movie.
Yeah, definitely. And I imagine that I mean, it could have been a conscious thing, but it also could have just been that's what it's like in certain parts of Tokyo. You know what I mean? And it just makes sense that these homeless characters would be focused on that. And they find the baby in trash, actually, a gigantic trash heap.
Yeah.
So, yeah, they're constantly finding sort of diamonds in the rough, finding things of value in trash. And you could also kind of apply that to the characters in a way. Like, they're kind of viewed as outcasts and rejects of society, sort of like trash. They're kind of thrown out of society in different ways, but they are sort of those valuable things found in the refuse.
Yeah, I think Jin even calls himself trash one of them calls himself trash quite a few times, I think. So yeah, that's an interesting thing to think about too, is that if you think of them as Jin says, trash, right? Then you're exploring in this whole movie the diamonds in that rough, which is really cool.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, overall, I think this movie's great.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah,
no, but seriously, like this movie, we skipped over a lot of the humor, and we skipped over a lot of even a lot of the meaning, and a lot of the kind of emotional scenes, and a lot of the coincidences too. And like the fact is, in 92 minutes, this movie is so much of all of that stuff. Like I think this is already a longer one of our half episodes here, and like it's just like it feels impossible to touch all of this stuff in one short discussion. Yeah, there's so much good stuff here.
Yeah, definitely. It's tough. These mini episodes, like, I wonder if we do too much plot summary sometimes. I feel like I do too much plot summary.
Yeah.
Like, we can talk about the things as we go, but it's hard to know how to structure these episodes sometimes.
Yeah, I agree. I think, and I think with some movies, it's harder, right? Like this movie, I feel like the plot is super important with this movie, right? I feel like even just to talk about the motif of coincidences or the themes of family, like you really have to dissect it through the plot, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. I mean, this is an interesting, we have one perspective on this, but we're interested obviously in what y'all think about this. So, if there's stuff that you guys like particularly about some episodes or dislike, we would love to make these episodes a more enjoyable viewing experience. So yeah, let us know.
Yeah, give us feedback. We'll maybe listen to it or maybe not. Who knows?
Yeah. We'll just
depends if it's good or not.
Yeah, that's right. But
I will say this I think is like a good entryway into Satoshi Kon's filmography. I feel like you could just watch this, not knowing anything about him or even just knowing about anime. This would also be a good way for someone to watch their first anime, I think. Just watch this as a Christmas movie, and it's very enjoyable, and yeah, it's a lot more straightforward than his other movies. So I think this is a good entryway into his filmography.
Yeah, and speaking of his other movies, we still have to do our readings for this movie and everything, but if this is somehow like your first episode you're watching of us, last week, we reviewed Perfect Blue as part of our psychological thrillers episode with Saltburn. So make sure you check that out if you haven't yet.
Yeah, that would be episode 7 of the Mind Your Movies podcast. This is 7.5. Right? Am I crazy? That's right.
That's probably right.
Or maybe this is...
Yeah, no, that's right. That's right.
Oh, okay, cool.
You're right.
All right.
Nope, that was episode 6.
No, that was 6. Okay, so that was 6. This is 6.5. 7 is next week. All right. I'm ahead of schedule.
We're recording these these come out obviously a little bit later than we record, so our timing's a little, Anyway,
yeah.
So Shane, putting all this together, what did you give this movie?
I gave it 4 stars out of 5.
Excellent. Yeah, I'm giving this one 4.5.
Nice. Yeah, 4.5 is fair. It's definitely a strong 4 stars for me. Mm-hmm. But I don't know, that one joke I didn't like, so I guess I gave 4. It's a great movie. It's a great movie.
Yeah, it really is. It's fun. It's dark. It's emotional, and it's a whole journey. I mean, you go on this whole journey with these 3 characters.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like it is such a well-made movie, and it has It's has a lot of themes, a lot of things on its mind. It's complicated, but I feel like it's also so approachable, and like almost anyone could watch this and enjoy it. So it's kind of a unique movie in that way.
And I think a lot of people can watch this and just like pretty easily dissect some of the themes. Like, I don't think it's a very like there's a lot of movies I think today in this idea of like, I don't particularly like this idea, but this idea of elevated horror or whatever that like intentionally try to hide their themes at times. And this is not trying to hide anything. This movie tells you everything, and I think that's enjoyable and very fun.
Yeah, but it doesn't treat the audience like we're stupid.
No,
which is part of the thing also, where its themes are clear, but it's not spoon feeding us. But it's also not. It's not like hidden, like almost like The Lighthouse. Maybe would be an example of a movie where the themes are. You could just watch The Lighthouse and be like, I actually have no idea what any themes or ideas about that at all. But if you watch this, like you kind of can understand something about it from the first time for sure.
Yeah, you can maybe come out of The Lighthouse not understanding what happened in the movie.
Yeah, true. You wouldn't understand what they're saying. You don't understand what's happening. None of it.
Why were they farting so much? Anyways.
Well, that's one of the things that made sense to me.
Anyways, so don't forget to check us out next week. And next week we're doing episode 7 on train episodes. That's right. We're doing train movies.
We're doing The General and Snowpiercer, which I think will be interesting because those are two very different and unique approaches to using a train in a movie.
Yes. And so the title of that episode is, of course, called Genopiercer.
The Genopiercer.
The Genopiercer. Yeah.
Yep. The Genopiercer. I'm excited for that one. And then after that, episode 7.5 will be coming out on Boxing Day, aka the day after Christmas. And it'll be Black Christmas.
Chop, chop.
Yeah. The original 1974. I think we're going to watch the remakes also.
I'm pretty committed at this point.
Yeah, I know. I'm going to watch them too. We'll see. I've never seen the remakes. I've only seen the original, so we'll see how that goes.
So as always, watch along with us. Watch, do your homework. Watch these movies. That way you can jump on in next week with our discussions.
Yep. And I guess that's that. Thanks for watching or listening.